All right. Expectation and variance of a random variable. The expectation is like finding the weighted mean. We did the weighted mean before. The variance is your standard deviation squared. So it just gets rid of the square root from our standard deviation formula that we did before. So first thing we're going to do is figure out what the expectation is, which is basically the same thing as finding your weighted mean. -1 has a probability of 35%, so we're going to take -1 times 0.35. 0 has a probability of 0.05, so we're going to take 0 times 0.05. 1 has a probability of 0.45. 2 has a probability of 0.05. And 3 has a probability of 0.10. So basically we're just taking the value times its probability and then adding all that up. My expectation or my weighted mean is going to be what once I figure all that out? Try that again. It's not what I got. That's yeah. I only have one negative number up there, and it's not very big, so I'm thinking I'm going to get a positive answer.
0.5.
0.5. That's what I got. 0.5 is what you should get. So you took -1 times 0.35 plus 0 times this plus 1 times that plus 2 times that plus 3 times that. If you wanted to do it in 5 steps and add them together, you could. Now, the variance. Remember when we did the standard deviation, we had the square root of, and then we had that great big long huge formula. Same kind of thing is going to work here. We are going to take each of these values, subtract the mean and square it, and then times it by the probability. We don't have to do the square root thing because variance is the standard deviation squared, and when you square the square root, it gets rid of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take -1, we're going to subtract 0.5, we're going to square that, and then we're going to multiply it by that probability. Plus, then we're going to just do each of our numbers. So 0 minus the 0.5 squared times its probability. And we're going to do the 1 minus the 0.5 squared times its probability. The 2 minus the 0.5 squared times its probability. And lastly, the 3 minus the 0.5 squared times its probability. Now here you do need that in parentheses, but you could just do times 0.35 instead of putting the parentheses, because your calculator will know that. So once you get all of that punched in,
$1.65.
1.65, that's what I came up with. 1.65. What that number really means, and it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you take the square root of that number. If you take the square root of 1.65, go ahead and do that for me. Not that you need it for this answer, but just to explain what's going on. Square root of 1.65 is about what?
1.2.
1.2. So 1.2 from the middle is where most of your values are going to lie, because that's what standard deviation is. Remember, we have a standard deviation of 1 and 2 and 3. Most of your values are going to be plus or minus 1.65 from the middle. Well, you can tell here that's not a very big spread. So yeah, most of my numbers would be in between here and here, right? All right. Number 8. First of all, we're going to find our expectation, which is basically finding our weighted mean by taking each of our values times its probability, adding them up. So 10 times the 0.30 plus 20 times the 0.25 plus 30 times the 0.15 plus 40 times the 0.30. $24.5, exactly what you should get. 20.4.5 is our expectation, is what they call it here. It's like the weighted mean. We're now going to find the variance. So when we find the variance, we're taking each of our values minus that expectation squared times the probability. So I'm going to start with 10 minus 24.5 squared times 0.30. And then I'm going to do 20 minus 24.5 squared times 0.25. And then I'm going to do 30 minus 24.5 squared times 0.15. And then 40 minus 24.5 squared times 0.3. $144.75. Again, if I was just checking out what that means, if I took the square root of 144, I'm just rounding it off, it would be 12, right? Square root of 144 is 12. So most values are plus or minus 12 from the middle. If I went 12, I'd be about like that bigger range. We can see that would make sense. Plus or minus 12 from the middle would include most our values. I don't know why they have you do variance. It really has no meaning to anything unless you actually do the standard deviation, but they do. So number 9, again, first of all, we want to find our expectation. So if we're going to find our expectation, what are we going to do?
Got an extra page.
You have oh, you never know when you get copies. Sometimes you have an extra page, sometimes you're missing a page.
You're going to take 40 times 0.15, 50 times 0.40.
And so forth, right. We're going to take each of our values times its probability and add it all up. And that's going to find our expectation, which is like your weighted mean. Mean is your average. So I think that might have been one of your questions on one of your homework things. Is what are you finding when you're finding the expectation? And you're going to put mean.
Is it 59.5?
It is 59.5. All right, then we're going to do the variance. In order to find the variance, what are we going to do?
Take 40 minus 59.5 squared times 0.15
Mm-hmm.
plus, yeah.
50 minus the 59.5 squared times our 0.40. And then we have 60 minus 59.5 squared times 0.10. 70 minus 59.5 squared times 0.05. And lastly, 80 minus 59.5 squared times 0.30.
$224.75.
224.75. To me, when I looked at that, I thought, geez, that number seems really big, but if you take the square root of that number, what do you get?
$14.99.
So most of our values are from the middle are within 14.99, about 15 from the middle. Well, that makes more sense than 224.75. Most of them are within 15 from the middle. All right. Now they're actually going to talk about mean and standard deviation.